Hi, this was originally part of the Human Revolution video, and then it became really long, so now it's its own special video, for you! Let's talk about mirrors for a bit. Games have been set in 3D recreations of real-world environments since before they were really even 3D. The 2.5D Doom 2 called this level Downtown and claims it's set in Texas. You can really tell. What Texan doesn't know the granite obelisk, the town square, and the giant arrow built into the floor that tells you how to leave Texas as soon as possible? The level designer behind this, Sandy Petersen, insists this later level is based on the floor plan of a real house he was building at the time. I'm gonna be honest, Sandy, either the Doom engine wasn't ideal for recreating real-world spaces, or your architect is a bad level designer. Petersen recently uploaded a video showing off the actual house, and finally the world can see what the level they played was meant to look like. Look, here's his, piano. Here's his board game collection. It looks impressive, but at least half of these are just expansions for Cthulhu Wars. And here's the desk where he writes tweets, like the one about killing one of the rats he found in this house, and how it made him feel like a man? But enough about Sandy Petersen's rat-infested nightmare house. As technology and art design improved, it became much more feasible to create realistic spaces. Games on the Build engine, like Blood, Duke Nukem 3D, and had just enough graphical and technical ability that places started to really feel real. Having stuff like impressive movie theaters with arcades in them and cinemas with seats, a moving train. You didn't need to look at the name of the map to find out where you were. Look at it, it's a cemetery, you can tell. And, incredibly, it even had working mirrors.
Whoa. Oh, just me.
Reflections are a really common thing in the world, so mirrors are an important part of making an immersive and real-feeling environment, especially when you're recreating real places that would actually have them. The Build engine managed all this, and it was made by just one guy, Ken Silverman. You can see his name, it's why his name's there. Despite being only 3D in a technical sense, Silverman managed to make an engine that makes you feel just a little bit more like you're really there. Because look, there you are.
Damn, I'm looking good.
This was conclusive proof that games had the capacity to create an amazing sense of space. It was downhill from here. You see, in actual 3D engines, mirrors get much harder to do. In Meatspace, light bounces off of an object and then off the reflective surface into your eyes, and bam! Working reflections, baby! These graphics are great! But video games aren't simulating photons. Getting a game to understand that a thing should be able to reflect other things doesn't come for free like it does in real life. When the original Half-Life came out, it was kind of beautiful, like the texture resolution, the use of lighting, the skeletal-based animation. It was super advanced, but they couldn't get mirrors working, so everyone washes their hands staring at concrete. So when developers really wanted a working mirror, they basically had to fake it. Mario 64 has a room with a big mirror that was super impressive in its day, and even had a little guy with a camera reflecting where the camera was. Mario was canonically being followed around by a cameraman the whole time. But it was really just a transparent wall with a separate Mario that copied your movements, which is really clever, but it's not a real mirror, so 0 out of 10. When Deus Ex came out in 2000, it was the first game to really feel like it took place in a world. 6 years after Doom 2, we finally got a truly immersive and atmospheric downtown. You had the streets of Hell's Kitchen, Battery Park, all of Liberty Island, complete with the Statue of Liberty and the New York skyline. Well, most of it. You had the markets of Hong Kong, you had train stations, hotels with individual rooms and a registry of who was staying there. There were even cute little rats running around you could accidentally step on and kill. I bet Sandy Petersen loved this game. It doesn't look amazing compared to modern games, and it wasn't the most advanced looking game when it came out, but the attention to detail instantly gives the game a sense of aesthetic and atmosphere that still holds up today. One specific detail really ties everything together, at least for me. In places you'd expect them, like bathrooms and so on, you had some of the first true 3D mirrors in gaming. Technically, it's not Deus Ex doing this. This is a property of the Unreal Engine. Every game on the engine tried to show this off, where at some point early on you'd see your reflection in something, just to show off the sweet tech they licensed, and then it doesn't come up again for the rest of the game. I don't remember a single mirror in Unreal, but I distinctly remember being able to upskirt yourself right at the beginning. But because Deus Ex was recreating a somewhat real modern world and not sci-fi or gothic fantasy, mirrors turn up everywhere you'd assume they would in real life and get the chance to truly shine. Pun intended. Mirrors even moved and rotated in certain sections, and their reflections moved with them. 20 years ago, this was mind-blowing stuff. And in a way, it still is, because even today, mirrors are still a pain in the ass to get working in games. This isn't a solved problem. Every time technology takes a step forwards, half the really cool tricks that made game worlds really stand out break and need to be invented all over again. There are no mirrors in Half-Life 2, for example. There's one exception in the Source engine, incidentally. Water can reflect the world, so the engine could do it, sort of, but the way they did it meant drawing the entire world a second time, which risked being super intensive on computers of the day, so they never incorporated it into the core aesthetic of the game's shiny surfaces, they just kept it with water. On lower graphics settings, water just shows a fake image texture that's not actually a reflection of anything, and no objects that can move are reflected in it. You needed a much faster computer to turn on these reflections like this. If you made real-time reflections a big part of your game's aesthetic, tons of players would never be able to see it. When this game first came out, if I tried to turn the graphics up even one notch, it would crash my computer on this level. More modern games try a thing called screen space reflections, which, well, reflect what you can see on the screen. This means you kinda have believable reflections in some games now without wasting as much processing power. But it also means once you can't see the thing that should be reflected, it stops existing in the reflection. You know, it has to be in your screen space for it to be reflectionsed. None of this is really ideal. Why are mirrors that hard, though? I mean, can't you just draw what the mirror would see, like in the build engine? Well, no, it's way harder than that, because what would they even be reflecting? Games don't usually have 3D models for the player characters. Why would they? You don't see it most of the time. I remember when they figured out a way of enabling a third-person mode in Jurassic Park Trespasser, a game where you use your arms in 3D space and you look down at a tattoo to gauge your health. It turns out that's all there is of you. You're just a cleavage with an arm. Can you imagine if you saw this in a mirror? I have nightmares about that happening. And over time, the problem with mirrors is only getting worse. The world in Deus Ex looks like you printed it out on your computer and stuck it together with Pritt Stick. The working mirrors were just a fun novelty. That's why the lack of mirrors in Half-Life isn't a big deal. The world looks like this. I'm not expecting realism. Now that the character models are a lot more uncanny and levels look generally a lot more realistic, the lack of mirrors is suddenly important. It's something obviously missing from an otherwise real place. Half-Life 2 didn't pioneer working mirrors. You don't even cast a shadow in Half-Life 2. A working mirror would give you an existential crisis. But it did pioneer a clever way of hiding the fact you're just a floating camera. Remember how water reflected things? It can't reflect the player character because Gordon Freeman doesn't have a body. You can see objects, but if you look down, you'll never see yourself. But here's the clever part. When you should be able to see your own reflection, you don't see anything else either. Even though objects can be reflected in water, they turn off when you get close. You can see this drone loses its reflection as it gets closer to me. This makes it harder to tell you can never see yourself, because you just don't think about it when you look down and can't see anything else reflected either. One of the problems techniques like this skillfully avoid isn't just how do we get mirrors working in our engine, it's also how do we avoid the fact that if we did, it would make everyone's work that much harder. To give an example, look at Mirror's Edge. Actual mirrors only show up in cutscenes where the reflection is basically pre-rendered. Mirrors don't actually show up in gameplay because then they'd have to reflect everything the character can do. And even when the player has a body, developers don't usually animate it that much. Fun fact about Mirror's Edge, if you hack it a little bit, you can actually enable a third-person mode. One thing it demonstrates about how hard mirrors would be, though, is that animators don't animate the parts of your character you don't normally see. Tons of the game's animations in movement and in cutscenes don't really animate the parts of her body that aren't going to be on screen. If it was possible to catch sight of yourself in shiny surfaces, you would have to make her entire body move believably all the time, which just quadrupled all the work the animators have to do with the main character. Even games with mirror in the title can't have them in the game. The original Prey has a really good mirror effect for 2006. It's so nice looking that they begin with the main character looking in the mirror. They really wanted to show this off. Doom 3 technically had mirrors first, but they looked like this, so Prey gets the credit. Whenever developers do get a mirror working, they love showing it off right at the beginning. However, none of these are actually working mirrors, they just faked it. I remember the one thing that almost impressed me in Fallout 4 was the opening when you could build a character in a mirror and the screen had all that stuff on it, and it was great. But actually they just faked it by putting the camera close to the character model's face, and once the game starts, mirrors just don't work anymore.
Just getting ready.
That's nice, but how? Most other games use a version of this trick. The modern Resident Evil games have parts with characters looking in mirrors, but the mirrors you regularly see in the game don't do this. At best, the mirror's just another invisible wall, looking into a copy of the room with your character model in it. 25 years later, we're still doing the Mario. My friend Susie, the Sphere Hunter on YouTube, modded Lady Dimitrescu to have a black dress, but her reflection is a pre-rendered recording, so the dress doesn't change in the mirror. Oh boy, that means there's two of them. Also, the video is 30 frames per second, so if the game's running faster than that, it doesn't even match up. Like, what the fuck? It's 2021 and we're still cheating to get basic household objects working in games? And even these fake reflections are a huge pain in the ass, so most developers don't even bother with those. Instead, the mirrors are broken, or they're just not on the walls at all. Whatever. Black Mesa, the remake of Half-Life 1 in Source, is really cool, but even though the Half-Life 2 engine has had some serious upgrades, they still can't do mirrors. So what was even the point of remaking it? That was the one thing missing in Half-Life. Do it again. You know what's really annoying about Black Mesa though? In some of their test footage showing off some of their other tech, it looks like they were working on adding mirrors in properly. And then I guess it didn't work and they had to give up. I am literally a bit miffed about this. It's interesting to think about, isn't it? Games have gotten really beautiful recently. I spent an embarrassing amount of time in Prey 2017 staring at Morgan's bedside table right at the start, at the intricate wood grain and how it reacts to the light. But as soon as you find a mirror, it's just a silvery, grey blob. At the beginning of Prey, you technically begin staring in the mirror while you pick your character's gender, but this is a trick. Something that the original Prey pulled off fantastically in the game is just fake. You can literally see a big gaping hole in modern 3D technology, and the thing it's failing to recreate is something everyone has in their home. Hell, you're probably looking at one right now. If you're watching this video on a glossy TV or your phone in the right lighting, you can see some of your face right now. Isn't it weird that, as beautiful and realistic as some games can be, so few of them can achieve such an everyday thing? This brings me to Deus Ex Human Revolution, the game I was supposed to be making a video about before I went on this massive tangent. I should probably cut all of this out. Human Revolution doesn't have working mirrors, like most games, which I thought was a bit of a shame considering its legacy, but what's amazing about it is, instead of just taking the route most games do and maybe cheating a couple of times to make it seem like they can do it, or just washing their hands of the issue entirely, the developers put a lot of effort into helping to hide the fact mirrors didn't work in their engine. Because it's the future, the bathrooms in Human Revolution don't have mirrors. They have big screens where mirrors would normally be, with news and other information on them. Presumably the mirrors have little cameras in them somewhere and they can be switched back to mirror mode. So they're mirrors in the same way that selfie cameras are kind of like mirrors. The mirror's in energy saving mode, so you can't see your reflection. Instead, you can read about Pong Boy. This is set 25 years before Deus Ex, where mirrors in bathrooms were mirrors, but maybe everyone just got annoyed with them and switched back at some point. Whatever, I can believe that. But wait, you ask, there are cars in Human Revolution. Don't cars have wing mirrors? Good question, viewer, and the answer is no they don't, you fucking dumbass! This is the future! Cars are designed to be sleek and advanced and cool and not need them anymore. Through clever thinking about the aesthetic of the future, the lack of mirrors has gone from a problem into an excuse to do clever world building. There is technically one actual normal mirror in Human Revolution. Adam Jensen's apartment building appears to still use regular mirrors, or at least Jensen specifically has one in his bathroom. But, and this is clever, the mirror is broken. What I love about this detail is how it's used to tell a story, specifically a story about landlords being shit. There's a post-it next to the mirror reminding Jensen to complain to the landlady again, implying that it's not been fixed for quite some time. And when he first comes in the front door, she preemptively responds to what has clearly become a constant complaint of his.
Before you ask, no, your mirror has not been replaced, Mr. Jensen.
Checking her computer tells you a new mirror has been waiting to be picked up from a supplier for ages, and she's just put off picking it up. But the other really cool thing about this is how the mirror got broken. It looks like it's been shattered by a single fist-sized impact. Adam Jensen has recently had a series of traumatic experiences. His ex-girlfriend, who he still cared for, was murdered right in front of him. He was horrifically injured himself, and then his employer, without his permission, replaced most of his body with augmented parts. Adam is dealing with some pretty heavy stuff right now. The implication here is that Adam lashed out against his own reflection because he doesn't like what he's become. The fact they had to cover for how the mirrors didn't work led to some clever world building and a really compelling piece of characterization. And this is really worth appreciating. However, it's also a reflection of a lot of the game's more important choices too. The game is missing a lot of the things that made the original unique and special and stand out, and in their place are very clever excuses for why they're not there. Also, once you get to China, they give up on doing cool things and there's just grey mirrors everywhere. Thankfully, the future of mirror tech might be a little brighter and hopefully slightly less yellow. As technology gets increasingly powerful, we're starting to be able to just simulate bounces of light for real, thanks to the pioneering effort of Harvard professor ray tracing. Is that right? Wait, hold on. 3D software has been able to get really nice ray-traced reflections and mirrors for quite some time, but it tends to take a while to render. This single frame took 39 seconds to render, which is pretty good, but it's hardly a playable frame rate. Luckily, game programmers are geniuses and have developed increasingly effective ways of simulating this, and modern graphics cards, if you can find one, are specially built to assist with this. This is that RTX thing people are talking about. This can make things light up in beautiful ways, which is how it's mostly used right now, prettier lighting and shadows, but some of them are starting to make even shiny surfaces reflect your face as you stare at them. So finally, you can just see your reflection in the world. And it runs so well on my top-of-the-line video card from 2017. Look! You can see him! There he is! It's so beautiful. My feet are warm. This means mirrors might finally be an integrated part of game engines going forward, without needing to be hacked in or worked around, and we'll live in a beautiful utopia where 3D environments actually make sense, as long as you're not just a camera with legs.